One of my favorite things about the after films is seeing them in an audience with a crowd, and the first two particularly, and watching how the fans react and how excited they get to see your two characters together. There's nothing better than a communal theatrical experience. I want to ask each of you, what is your favorite personal theatrical experience you've ever had? A movie that was made better by seeing it in a theater, seeing it with your friends, a movie that meant a lot to you. I'll start with you, Joe.
Avengers Endgame. I cried 6 times during the movie. And I know
Did
the
you
points
really?
because I watched it again and I cried exactly 6 times. There's like 6 moments that I can't, there's probably more, but that
Can
was
you give
just,
me one of the moments? I'm curious which one
oh
you're
no,
referring
because I'll start crying. I can't talk about that film. Um, I'm getting emotional thinking about it, but that was just like, it's the biggest movie on the face of it's 10 years of Marvel history, like all, and character journeys, just all accumulate, and everyone in that, people are screaming, it's just very, wow.
Yeah, you are awesome. I
Very
actually
nice.
was at the premiere for that in LA. It was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever seen in my life. Hero, for you, do you have a film that meant a lot to you to see in theaters?
Top that, am I? Like, I'm not gonna top but I would mention. Do you know what? Recently, I went to see People Just Do Nothing. There's a movie of a TV show called People Just Do Nothing, which is like very English, British, like London humor, and it's so niche and like I don't expect you guys or like very many people to even get it, but that's kind of what made it all the more special. I went to watch that in the cinema the first day it came out here, and because it has such like a niche fan base, I completely agree with you. That thing of going to the cinema, everyone, we felt like you kind of earned it to be there, and everyone's kind of like in a family watching it because they all, they've put in the work and seen all the series, seasons up to it. And I hadn't been to the cinema in ages, so that was almost in my eyes can kind of just about compete with Endgame, but maybe not on paper.
That's awesome. My wife and I watched this film twice already, and one of the things I found really interesting about it was I know you get questions all the time about the intimate sequences in these films, but to me, it's the emotional connection your characters have. I prefer the scenes where you're just having conversations or arguments, and the acting in those scenes are really incredible. But there's a scene in this film that I found interesting, and it takes place on the phone, and I won't go into too much graphic detail about it. But I was wondering, in terms of when you film a scene like that, is it easier to film an intimate scene over the phone? Or is it easier to film it together? And are you on the phone with each other when you shoot that scene?
It's funny, I was just talking about this a minute ago. So we shot that at separate times. And I shot that with Ivan, our Bulgarian first AD, and Castille. And it's really interesting when you're reading with when you're you're doing that. And is it easier? I think I don't like phone scenes because it's you just acting with yourself, basically, even if you have someone reading for you, and it's kind of you just on screen. And so no, I think that I personally find it more difficult.
Yeah, I'd agree with Joe. I think almost like all scenes that you do on your, I always prefer acting with someone because you can kind of, you bounce off them and they're like carrying half the load in a sense. So always definitely like easier to have, another member of the team on your side with you. But yeah, most of the phone scenes we have always tried where we can to use each other, even if we're offset and stuff. But obviously sometimes you might be having to do a photo shoot for press stuff while someone else is filming, and you can't always make that happen. So it is always, I'd completely agree with Joe. It does throw you off a bit when you're acting, but the person replying to you is Bulgarian and 30 years older than the person who you expected to be on the other end of the phone call. But it's acting, so if we couldn't do it, we wouldn't be very good at our jobs.
Right. Hero, you have a great balance in your performance and throughout these three films, in my opinion, where it's this juxtaposition between vulnerability and his tough skin. And there's this element where like he can break at any moment, and the vulnerability to me is really interesting. I wonder if you could just talk about finding that tonal balance for the character and kind of being the hard character that he is, but also this vulnerable element to himself as well, and how you found that. I know it's in the script and I know it's from the direction, but how did you find that?
First of all, thank you. So you've been so kind about everything. I just wanted to say thank you for all your kind words about the film and performances and everything. Yeah, do you know what? Like you say, it's on the page, and that's kind of what those aspects of his character are what drew me to him in the first place. So I really enjoy playing playing him and playing on that fine line. And I don't even know how I would get into how I do. I spend a lot of time before the deeper, more emotional scenes, just needing to be on my own and getting into the right mindset. And a few people in my life who I definitely draw on that kind of temperament, that I've had kind of first-hand ability to draw from is always interesting. But no, that's I don't even have like a key to it. We just kind of turn up and see what happens. But it is one of the funnest things about playing Harden is trying to balance that vulnerability, but like you say, tough skin. You worded it so well.
You know, this is something I find really interesting. I know the basic answer to this question is just purely acting. But I listen to Howard Stern a lot, and he's like one of the best interviewers I've ever heard. And I think he's just a fascinating interviewer. And one of the things he asks actors sometimes, or in terms of people who actually have movies where they play romantic characters or they have intimate sequences, is this concept of how do you not actually emotionally fall for the person that you're working with. And I know that you're acting, and I totally get that, but I find that interesting in terms of like, do you have conversations about that? Because you're working so closely in such close proximity, you're playing characters who are in love with each other, that are physically together. How do you keep that from happening? And do you have conversations about that in terms of that? I'll go to you, Joe, on that.
Well, there's something great that a friend of mine who's an actor told me, which is a lot of actors know the importance of action, but they don't know the importance of cut. And I think you just have to be aware of both those things. And when you're playing a character who's different to you and the other person's playing a character who's different to them, it's when cut happens, it's you're different people. So I think that just on screen, it's like, oh, these two people, wow, look at this conversation, it's flowing. But then you say cut and, oh, one of them has a different accent, the other one has a different personality. It's just not, do you know what I mean? It's like one doesn't kind of affect the other.
Hero, for you, is that something that like comes into your mind at all?
Yeah, no, I think Joe explained it really well. I think that summarized it perfectly. And you do put so much effort in preparing and planning for the role that you are hopefully aware that it's not yourself, because you've kind of dissected it prior. But no, it's an interesting question. But again, I think like Joe said, when we call cut, it's just like calling action, in the way that, you wouldn't expect Joe to carry on talking in her accent when you call action, and it's the same vice versa after cut. So.
I know this might be a strange scene to bring up, but it's actually one of my favorite scenes in the film. It's a scene where you both are just brushing your teeth at the same time. And for some reason, that scene speaks volumes to the characters, even though there's no dialogue really there. I just love that scene. I think it just speaks to the characters. I wanted to ask what that scene kind of meant to you, just the silence of that scene, and kind of like what you think it meant to the characters.
I'd like to take credit for that. I don't know if it actually was me, but I think it was. And I very much like, I like scenes in movies where they're doing human things. Like, see people on the toilet reading a book or brushing their teeth with their boyfriend. Like, it's not always, not two people, but like one's, like in a marriage, it's like, or in a relationship, someone's on the toilet reading a book and their partner's in the other room and it's like, oi, what do you want for dinner? Like, that to me is reality. And I get frustrated when I don't see that in films. And so I think it's really nice when you get to do that. Like, there's a scene in the film where I think there's a Tampax box, and I was really pushing for her to like just be doing something normal before she gets this phone call from or she thinks she gets a text from Harden or something. Like, I like normalcy in film.
And Harden, I'll keep on call you Harden. Hero, last thing for you before I go, the journal that Harden keeps. Do you actually write in that, and what do you put in that journal?
I do, yeah. If it's montage scenes, I might go a bit off brand of Harden, and do some random doodles of what's in front of me. But of all the proper scenes that he's supposed to be writing in it, and the camera's rolling, I am writing what Harden would write. A lot of the time, the prop people will write something in there that Harden will have written directly from the books. So I'll often continue on that and just kind of get lost in Harden's thoughts. And there's pages in there of me just literally documenting random things that he might be thinking. So it's not 100% in his brain, but yeah, 95%, especially when the camera's rolling, I'm writing what I think he would be writing. So.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations to both of you. Thank you so much for the thought that you put into these films. Obviously, like Joe, just hearing you talk about the brushing the teeth thing, that scene just resonates. It really does. It's a simple scene, but it resonates. So congratulations to both of you guys. Thank you for always being so kind. And my wife is such a huge fan, and this has been a big part for us together. So thank you so much.
So So glad. Always a pleasure talking to you guys, Kevin.
Nice talking to you. Y'all be safe, okay?
Bye.
My wife actually made me a fan of this franchise, and we're both journalists, so we both talked about this a lot. And I think this is the best film in the franchise that has the best direction, has the best cinematography, it has the best performances. And I wanted to ask you in terms of your balance between soundtrack and score, because they bleed into each other so perfectly, and the music that you choose in the scenes versus the score you have playing in the scenes is incredible. And I wanted to ask about the difference in how you choose how the score will complement the soundtrack and vice versa.
I mean, I have to say that my expertise is in choosing really great people to work with. The music supervisors and the composer. Now, the composer is someone that I've worked with several times before. He is just like fabulous at what he does, and he does something, he mocks it up, I give him like a handful of notes and he comes back and it's perfect. It's not like we have to go back and forth 10 times. My kind of inspiration was really the Normal People soundtrack. We temped all of that stuff in because that's what you do, initially. You have to temp in someone else's soundtrack. And a lot of like Johan Johansson, is that right? A lot of his stuff as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the greatest composers of all time. He's gone way too soon. His score for Arrival is like just absolutely devastating.
It's beautiful.
In terms of, I know you get questions about this a lot in terms of a film you're making like this, but to me, like the intimate scenes are part of the movie, but it's really about the emotional connection these characters have outside of those scenes as well. Those scenes are just complementary to what they're kind of going through. And I wonder how you choose the right song for those scenes, because those scenes, like, and I know it sounds strange, but like it works well within almost the movement of the scene and the way the scene is shot. And I wonder how and even like when the song crescendos at some point, it factors into kind of what the characters are doing. So I'm wondering how you kind of play with that a little bit.
Yeah, that is a lot of work. So we go through a lot of music and try out, 10, 20 songs in each. And if it's not like, it's very clear from the outset when you watch something, like, is this going to work or not? Nope. Next one. Nope. Next one, and what I think the hardest part about that is you fall in love with something and then you can't afford it. Which I guess is, that's always what happens. But with those scenes in particular, like I can't let myself watch something too many times with the same song and like fall in love with that, because then it's just too perfect and you can't imagine anything else. So like in one of the scenes we had Ex-Ambassadors Unsteady, which is like such a beautiful song. And we had to take it out like as soon as possible because there was nothing else that was going to be as good. And the gym scene one, we cycled through a lot of options for that. To find that's a lot of work to get the right songs for those scenes in particular.
My wife and I visited the aquarium in Atlanta, where I know one of the first film when they shot that scene in the aquarium, which you then used that shot in your film here. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, you're directing your film and shooting your film differently than other directors have shot the first and second film. So the color correction's different, the editing's different. How do you then splice in another film that wasn't directed by you that then flows in your look and continues the look of your movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a challenge. Like, I think in particular, the second one to the third one feels you'll notice that like the pieces that we spliced in were all from the first movie. Because I think that one has a little bit more of a similar visual aesthetic. So, we did try to put parts of number 2 in, and you're right. It just like, it didn't quite fit because it's very different. But the cinematography in number 1 has a little bit more of a filmic reality to it. So it did cut really well. And I think there are so many beautiful moments in that scene, that movie, and like the lake scene. I was dying to get my hands on that. Anything we could do to get that, to borrow that, and use it in my own film. But yeah, it's always a challenge to be able to do that kind of stuff.
All right, so my favorite scene in this film, weirdly enough, is the brushing of the teeth. And I know it's a really random scene to bring up, but for some reason it speaks so much to the characters in complete silence as they brush their teeth together. To me, it's like my wife and I brush our teeth together. It's like it's a simple scene, but why do you feel it works so well? Why do you think it's so effective?
Oh my gosh, I love that you said that, because I will say that scene, they tried to cut it when we were running late on a day, and they tried to cut it then. And then when we got into the edit, they tried to cut it then, because they're always trying to make things shorter. And I kept I had to fight for that scene, and I'm so glad that someone loves it. I think it's so like, that's what was really, that's where I kind of like saw myself in this film and in this franchise, was that like I felt I could bring a reality to it. Like I don't see it as kind of a send up or like a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. I see it as like, this is very high stakes emotional stuff, mostly from the point of view of a young woman. And so everything feels like that much more extreme when you're young and you're in the throes of passionate, toxic love. But I think these little moments of brushing your teeth to get like, that's what a relationship is. And
Yes.
That's where you can really like hang your hat on this moment. So while you have all these theatrics of the, jacuzzi sex and all of that stuff, it's like, but this is the real moment. This is what gives it something that you can really grab onto. And then you're able to see yourself through the eyes of Tessa, because there are those moments that you can, then kind of extrapolate on. And I think it was really important to show that that Hardin and Tessa, I almost said Hero and Joe, that would have been bad, that they, they have a real relationship, the two of them, you see that in that little moment. So I thought that was really important too. I'm glad you liked that part.
Love that scene. I actually called Hero Hardin earlier, so it's the same mistake. So congratulations to you. It's nice to meet you. And seriously, too. I'm so happy that scene's in the film, because my favorite scene in the movie. It's the most real scene for me. It was great. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.